Okay, folks, hi. Great to see you again. I mentioned in the introduction that I wanted to give you folks an opportunity to see some of what we've been doing with the on-campus students in relationship to student development work and learning and curriculum. So I know in your reading you had some materials, or I mentioned some materials that we've added to the curriculum since you took design, delivery, and evaluation. So I wanted to share with you in a light version the PowerPoint that we've been using, or I've been using on this class, so that you can get the visuals to pull together the reading that you had. So I'm going to do this in 10 minutes or less, maybe 15, we'll see. So let me run through it for you. Here we go, all right? So, continuing reflections on student development. When you took design, delivery, and evaluation, way back in your memory banks, we talked about psychosocial development, cognitive, structural, and moral development, and we talked about social identity. Remember that? I'm reminding you of this because we're talking in this module about learning and curriculum development, and a piece of that is knowing who you're working with, okay? So, these are a raft of social identity development models that have to do with Black identity development, Asian American identity development, lesbian gay identity development. They're all in one of the suggested readings. You'll notice they all have stages to them, all right? So what's important is to say that in each of these stages, we have race, we have class, we have gender, we have sexuality. They're all socially constructed. They're all systems that rely on power relationships of some sort. They're all contextual. So that means there's a certain amount of fluidity to each of them. They have a social structure which is on the macro level, all of them. And then they have a social psychological aspect to them, which is on the micro level, and fits a lot with the other categories of development that we spoke about before, the psychosocial and the cognitive structure, all right? Okay, and they're all interdependent of knowledge base and an activism component. So that's a little bit different than the other types of student development or individual development that we looked at. So what does this mean? It means that an individual is going to go through some predictable stages of psychosocial development, and at the same time that's happening, they're also integrating their own identity development. So one person isn't only struggling with the sense of identity as a human being, but they are adding the component of a human being who is, for example, lesbian, gay, and or of color, and or of whatever other category they identify themselves by, okay? So it's an evolving process. It's not something that turns on and off one day. So for example, someone who's encountering themselves as a lesbian gay for the first time in high school might not even be aware of it yet. Or he or she may be exploring what it means to be lesbian, gay, or bisexual. So they're in this awareness stage. As they hit 18 to 22 years old as a college student, they may not be aware of it yet, or they may be at an exploring phase of what it means to be lesbian, gay, or bisexual. They're deepening one's identity and their understanding about who they are as a lesbian gay. All right? 25 plus years old as an adult will probably be aware by that stage of the game, but may not even be far past that stage. Or they could be at any of these other stages because they're a little bit older. They've had more time and developed more. So this is just one aspect of identity development. One could be integrating your sexual orientation and racial identity as well as other aspects. So now what happens with all of this? All right. The current understanding of identity development, there are commonalities across those theories. They have statuses, they agree it's socially constructed, they consider the environment, the influence of culture and societal norms create unstated expectations on the individual. All right, so it's influenced social status, the role of oppression in marginalized populations, and multiple identities intersect with each other in one human being. All right? Now, I'm doing this in how long? If you were in the on-campus discussion, we'd be an hour 2 right now of a 4-hour class. So if I'm blowing through this quickly, I would say stop it and take a look at the reading one more time, all right? But for now, I'm going to press on. Okay. Current models, they stress intersectionality, that a person crosses a number of different identities at the same time, and that they're fluid. Okay? It's not a static process. The more important a social identity is to the individual, the closer to the core it is moved. So if this core is who I am, my characteristics, my identity, my personal attributes, what's all around here is the context in which I'm in at the moment, my family background, sociocultural conditions, my career decisions and life planning, that if you pick any number of these orientation, identity areas, the ones that are closest to the core are probably the ones that I'm grappling with or I'm spending the most, I would define myself by. Does that make sense? Okay. And again, you can spend time with these, they're in the reading. Other noteworthy perspectives, this is the stuff that's a little bit different than when you did your reading in the other class. And what I really wanted to introduce you to is Baxter Magolda, because her work in the international education field has really become quite popular, and I think it's good for you to get exposed to what she talks about, all right? So she breaks things down based on Keegan's work, cognitive, interpersonal, and intrapersonal, and talks about how people develop and connect across these 3 areas. This is going to be quite a slide here. All right, watch this slide. First, she's got 4 areas of development, stages of development that a person will go through. The first, we're following external formulas. Our individual characteristics are really encapsulated by the people that are authority figures in our lives, all right? So if you figure this little guy that's running along here is probably secondary school, maybe heading off to college, if that's what he or she does. This could be a parent, this could be a teacher, it could be a religious person in their lives, a coach, but this is when somebody asks them their opinion on something, they're taking it from what the authorities said. We should do things this way. And that's the way I believe it, right? But then what happens is I hit what they call a fault line, overseas, or I move to another part of the country, I'm standing at the crossroads and I'm saying, do I really think this way? I'm being exposed to things in my own level, in my community, outside of my community, and then there's a macro system, a worldwide, some things that are going on. So how do I know? What types of relationships do I want to have? What kind of values do I have? What do I really believe? Okay? Then I become, the third stage is becoming self-authored. And I think this becomes important because it's right in here where when we have forces that sort of move us, you know, we get confronted by something. And we say, what do I really think about this? Do I come back and head to what my external people told me in the first place? Or do I move forward and start to form my own opinions? I know because, or I am thinking this way because I'm making my own choices. I'm becoming self-authored, all right? So there's conditions associated with moving forward. There's conditions that make us move backwards. And this is where I think when we talk about learning and curriculum design and how we build the academic components of our program, this becomes so important because we have participants or students that are in these places in their lives, and it's up to us to help them move forward. All right? In our last stage, our participant, our little runner, is building an internal foundation. I'm learning how to accept ambiguity. I'm starting to figure it out. I'm figuring out what's mine now and where I want to be moving forward. All right? So this is Baxter McGoldis. And you'll see in the reading I suggested, another person, they came up with this learning partnership, kind of interesting concept, but it comes from the work of Stanford. You may remember in the readings last year, the idea of challenge and support, and how when we design our programs, we want to hover in that place where we support our students, but we also continually challenge them. And here's where we're going with this, all right? 3 dimensions of development: cognitive, intrapersonal, interpersonal. 4 major developmental points along the journey: external formulas, listening to somebody else. Crossroads, you're standing at the crossroads. Who was that? Eric Clapton? Am I dating myself? Let me see. Standing at the crossroads, I become self-authored, and then I build an internal foundation to go by. Variables: who I am as an individual, and the environment that I am in. All right? Here it is again. Ooh, isn't that pretty? Gotta love it. Okay, so I provided this exercise in the PowerPoint, and our folks will do it in class, where I have them read a case study and then try to map where the individual student is at each of these places. And if you want to have that same experience, you can. And I'll tell you, but you have to promise not to tell the on-campus students about this. The answers come up right after. But don't tell them, okay? Because I don't want them to know. I want them to do it on their own. So it's our secret. Okay. Learning in the curriculum, other key considerations. We have models, but there are always exceptions. So what can you say? Dealing with high school students is different than dealing with an elder population. Who's a part of a group has a major impact on the group's functioning, how effective they are, the kind of experience that they have, group membership, race, gender, sexual orientation, etc., etc., etc. So, if we are looking at designing a academic plan, a curriculum, a learning activity as part of a program, we will need to make adjustments based on who's in the group and what they bring to it. If we have 15 women and 1 man, it's going to look different than if we have 10 women and 5 men. Or if we have 2 women and 10 men. You see where I'm going here? Okay. What about if we take a look at it from the perspective of background? 10 European Americans and 2 students of color. Or 6 European Americans and 6 students of color. Although color isn't really good because I'm white and that's a color too. But you see where we're going here. All right. So how will a group be different if there are 6 European Americans, 3 African Americans, and 3 Asian Americans? These are all things we have to think about once we get our basic design in play. How do the identities that people bring to our group, our classroom, our program impact what we're doing? All right? The theme of the program makes a difference. If the theme of the program is gender identity or women's issues, you'll have people who are there for certain reasons that might be challenging for some members of the group and not for others. The concept of privilege or entitlement, is it part of the program? There's good reason to question our assumptions about psychosocial development and how learning takes place when we take it outside of the U.S. or even within the U.S. but to a different environment than our classrooms. The individual brings his or her own context, plus we add to this their personality, their abilities, their values, their identity development. And then you take this person who's got all these little squiggly lines in them and we put them into an international education setting with a bunch of other shapes and sizes and squiggly lines. So next week, it'll probably be this week for you folks, you'll be working on facilitating a learning activity. And I want you to think some about the range of psychosocial and cognitive development of the group that you're working with, which is why I asked you folks to put down your purpose, your content, your learners, because you want to make sure that you think about who you're designing for. There's individual styles and approaches that work in a universal classroom you need to consider. And we want to create an open space, a safe space in our learning environments. Okay? So, identity development in 10 minutes or less. Good luck, folks. Bye-bye.